Right now, the largest World Cup in history is about to kick off. 48 nations, 16 cities across the United States, Mexico, and Canada. Billions of eyes watching. The biggest sporting event on Earth. But something unprecedented is happening, and almost nobody is talking about it. For the first time in modern football history, fans, politicians, and even former FIFA executives are openly calling for a boycott. Not of a dictatorship, not of a war zone, but of the United States of America. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, FIFA expelled them from international competition within 72 hours. Swift, decisive, no questions asked. But today, as IC operations result in deaths under custody, as families are separated in the very cities hosting matches, and as entire qualified nations face visa restrictions that make attending virtually impossible, FIFA remains absolutely silent. The World Cup will happen. That's not the question. The question is what it will cost the world to pretend everything is normal. And that answer is far darker than anyone wants to admit. I'm Gabriel Bulgakov, and today we're exposing the silent boycott fracturing the most universal sport on the planet. Football has never been just a game. It's where national identities clash, where collective dreams ignite, and where geopolitical fault lines become impossible to ignore. The World Cup is the pulse of humanity compressed into 90 minutes of tension, beauty, and raw emotion. I've been watching World Cup since I was a child. I still remember USA '94, the heat, the passion, the sense that for 1 month the entire world spoke the same language. Even now, when I see my country's flag in the stands, I feel that electricity. But this time, that feeling in my chest isn't excitement. It's dread. Because World Cup 2026 isn't just a tournament anymore. It's become a referendum on something much bigger. It's become a test of whether football can remain universal when the host nation practices selective exclusion. Since late January, when Donald Trump's second administration began implementing policies that sent shockwaves across the international community, a debate emerged that most mainstream media won't touch. Can you boycott the World Cup? Should you? And more importantly, what does it mean when millions of people around the globe are asking that question for the first time in their lives? Because when fans start questioning whether attending the World Cup is morally acceptable, something fundamental has shifted. This isn't about ticket prices or bad refereeing. This is about families who work sunrise to sunset to send money home, now living in terror that a knock on the door means deportation. This is about the dream of attending football's greatest celebration turning into a nightmare of fear and exclusion. Let me take you back to February 2022. Russia invades Ukraine. The world reacts with horror. Within days, FIFA and UEFA act decisively. Russian clubs expelled from European competitions. The national team banned from World Cup qualification. Russian venues stripped of hosting rights. The message was clear: violate international norms, face immediate consequences. No discussion, no appeals, just action. Fast forward to 2026. The United States, under Trump's renewed leadership, implements immigration policies that human rights organizations are calling systematic persecution. ICE raids intensify. Reports of deaths in custody multiply. Families are torn apart in cities like Los Angeles, Miami, and New York, the very cities that will host World Cup matches. Expansion threats against Greenland, tariffs imposed on co-host nations Mexico and Canada, visa restrictions targeting qualified teams from Iran, Haiti, Senegal, and Ivory Coast. And FIFA's response? Absolute silence. Not a statement, not a concern, not even a polite request for clarification. The contrast is staggering. Russia gets expelled for invading a neighbor. The United States gets a celebration while implementing policies that terrify millions within its own borders. The hypocrisy isn't subtle. It's structural. However, while FIFA stays silent, other voices are breaking through. And these aren't fringe activists or political extremists. These are people from the very heart of football's establishment. Joseph Blatter. Yes, that Joseph Blatter. The man who ran FIFA for 17 years, survived scandal after scandal, the embodiment of football's old guard. Even he is speaking out. Just weeks ago, Blatter publicly endorsed warnings from Mark Pith, a Swiss lawyer who worked on FIFA's own governance reforms. Pith's message was blunt: fans should stay away from the United States. The climate of insecurity, the abuses by immigration services, the targeting of vulnerable populations, all make this World Cup uniquely dangerous for certain groups. And Blatter, with all his baggage, all his controversial history, agreed. When even the most cynical figures in football are raising red flags, you know something is deeply wrong. But the most powerful voices are coming from Europe. In Germany, OK Gottlich, vice president of the German Football Federation, did something almost unthinkable. He compared the current situation to the 1980 Olympic boycott of Moscow following the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. But here's what makes his statement so significant. He argued the threat today is actually greater. Not just Greenland or trade wars, but fundamental values about human dignity and international norms. Gottlich gave voice to millions of German fans wrestling with a painful question. Does attending this World Cup mean endorsing Trump's policies? The German Football Federation quickly shut down the boycott discussion officially. They released the usual statement about sports unifying power, about not mixing politics with football. But the fact that a vice president of one of the world's most powerful football federations even raised the possibility tells you everything about how deep this crisis runs. France went further. Eric Auquer, a deputy from France Insoumise, didn't just suggest a boycott. He demanded it as a moral obligation. His question was razor-sharp. Can we really imagine playing the World Cup in a country that threatens neighbors, undermines international law, and systematically persecutes vulnerable populations? He even proposed that FIFA should strip the United States of hosting rights and concentrate the entire tournament in Mexico and Canada. The French government dismissed it immediately. But again, the fact that a prominent legislator in a major European democracy publicly called for excluding the United States from its own World Cup reveals the scale of global discontent. Then there's the Netherlands. Journalist Thijs ten den Kuken launched a petition demanding the Dutch national team withdraw. Within days, over 150,000 people signed it. The petition's language was uncompromising. Attending this World Cup means giving implicit support to policies of violent terrorism against immigrants and legitimizing military threats against democratic nations. The Dutch government and Football Federation rejected the proposal, but 150,000 signatures don't lie. That's not a fringe movement. That's a significant portion of Dutch football culture saying they can no longer separate their love of the game from their conscience. But here's what breaks my heart. Where are the voices from Latin America? The region that should be leading this conversation is almost completely silent. Where are the players speaking out? Where are the coaches? In 2022, when Qatar hosted the World Cup amid human rights concerns, several high-profile figures publicly supported fans who chose to boycott. Luis Figo explicitly said those fans were right to follow their convictions. This time? Nothing. Silence. Mauricio Pochettino, the Argentine coach now leading the United States national team, has actively pushed back against boycott calls. We're not politicians, he says. We should separate sport from politics. It's a convenient position when you're collecting a paycheck from the very system being criticized. And I understand his position, but I also understand the millions of Latino families living in terror right now. This is where the story stops being about geopolitics and becomes intensely, painfully personal. Millions of Latino fans live in World Cup host cities. Miami, Los Angeles, New York. These should be cities celebrating football's greatest party. Instead, they've become zones of fear. About half of all Latinos residing in the United States report they're worried about deportation, either for themselves or someone close to them. Think about that. Not 10%, not 20%. Half of an entire community living with the fear that any day, any moment, ICE could tear their family apart. Confirmed reports show that detentions of people without criminal records have exploded. Holding times in detention facilities have increased dramatically. And deaths in custody, once rare, have become disturbingly common. Organizations have documented harsh conditions, inadequate medical care, and cases of what can only be described as systematic brutality. Latino neighborhoods in Los Angeles have gone into a lockdown mentality reminiscent of the pandemic. Families avoid public spaces. Children are kept home from school. Community gatherings are canceled. Even United States citizens of Latino descent report constant anxiety, afraid that a random traffic stop could turn into an interrogation, that their accent or appearance might trigger suspicion. The psychological toll is immeasurable. And here's the cruel irony. These are the communities that should be most excited about the World Cup. These are the neighborhoods where kids grow up dreaming of seeing their heroes play in person. These are the families who save for years to afford a single ticket. But that dream has curdled into fear. Fan groups have canceled watch parties because they're afraid a bar or stadium could become an ICE target. The joy of a goal has been replaced by the terror of what might happen on the way home. For fans trying to travel from Latin America, the obstacles multiply exponentially. Visa wait times at United States consulates in Mexico, Colombia, Brazil, and other nations remain extraordinarily long. The process has become more invasive. Applicants now face social media reviews, increased fees, and aggressive questioning about their intentions. A trip planned for years suddenly requires proving you're not a threat. The psychological impact is profound. You save money. You plan the trip. You buy your ticket. And then you face an interrogation that makes you feel like a criminal before you've even left your own country. Fan organizations have raised urgent concerns about ICE presence near stadiums or on transit routes. The fear isn't hypothetical. It's based on patterns of behavior over the past months. And for fans from countries with existing travel restrictions, Haiti, Iran, Senegal, the situation is even worse. Thousands of potential attendees are simply excluded by default. The World Cup for everyone becomes the World Cup for those with the right passport. So with all this discontent, all these voices, all this pain, why won't the boycott actually happen? The answer is brutally simple: money and power. FIFA operates on ironclad contracts. Any federation that withdraws faces financial penalties in the hundreds of millions of dollars, exclusion from future tournaments, and complete isolation from international football. No federation will take that risk. The World Cup generates billions in revenue. Television rights alone are worth more than most countries' GDP. Sponsorships, tourism, merchandise. The economic stakes are so high that moral considerations become almost irrelevant. Moreover, the tournament is split across 3 countries. Even fans who refuse to attend matches in the United States can go to Mexico or Canada. This diffuses the impact of any potential boycott. History shows that successful sports boycotts required broad governmental consensus. The boycott of apartheid South Africa, the 1980 Moscow Olympics, the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics. These succeeded because governments coordinated action. In 2026, that coordination doesn't exist. Germany, France, England, Brazil, Argentina all prioritize their sporting and economic interests. And honestly, I understand why. National teams represent more than just sports. They represent identity, pride, collective hope. Asking a country to sacrifice that is asking them to sacrifice something fundamental. What we're more likely to see is a fan boycott. Fewer people traveling to United States venues. Lower hotel occupancy. Canceled tourism packages. The stadiums will fill, but perhaps with more locals and fewer international visitors than expected. The symbolic impact will be real even if the practical impact is limited. In the geopolitics of sport, major events function as cultural barometers. They reveal where societies stand on fundamental questions of values and priorities. Qatar 2022 faced intense criticism over human rights, labor practices, and LGBTQ rights. The tournament happened anyway, but the criticism left a permanent mark on how we think about FIFA and host selection. Something similar is unfolding now, but with a crucial difference. Qatar was a small nation with limited global influence. The criticism, while valid, came from a position of Western superiority. This time, the target is the United States itself, the self-proclaimed leader of the free world, the nation that positioned itself as the arbiter of international norms. The hypocrisy is so glaring that even FIFA's usual defenders are struggling to justify it. This World Cup will be remembered not for the goals scored or the champions crowned, but for the question it forces us to answer: what are we willing to ignore for the sake of entertainment? Because that's what this comes down to. Every person who attends, every fan who cheers, every federation that participates is making a choice. Maybe they're choosing pragmatism over principle. Maybe they're choosing joy over justice. Maybe they're just choosing to believe that sport can somehow remain pure while the world around it burns. But make no mistake, it is a choice. And that choice will define not just this tournament, but how we think about football's role in society for decades to come. Trump understands the symbolic power of this event. He's using it to project American strength and normalcy. His critics see it as an opportunity to highlight American hypocrisy. Both sides recognize that this World Cup is about far more than football. Remember at the beginning when I said the question wasn't whether the World Cup would happen, but what it would cost us to pretend everything is normal? Here's the answer. It will cost us the illusion that football is universal. It will cost us the belief that sport transcends politics. It will cost us the trust of millions of fans who now understand that FIFA's principles are negotiable depending on who's writing the checks. The boycott that won't happen reveals something more important than any boycott that would. It shows us exactly how much economic power matters and how little moral authority means in modern global sport. The crack in the cup isn't just symbolic. It's real. And it's spreading. So I ask you directly, will you attend this World Cup? Will you watch it? And if you do, what does that choice mean? I won't be going to any stadium on United States soil. Not because I can't, but because I've seen enough. I stand with the families living in fear, with the fans being excluded, with everyone who understands that some celebrations aren't worth the cost. Immigration should be managed, absolutely. But it should never become a tool of terror, a weapon that separates children from parents and turns dreams into nightmares. The World Cup will kick off. The games will be played. But beneath the surface, that fracture will remain. And those of us who see it will never forget. Thank you for staying until the end. Peace and solidarity to all those suffering. Until next time, friends.